Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for January 26th, 2024. I'm Benji Fisher, sharing my screen and moderating, and also present are Duncan McCauley, Ralph Kohler, Simo Helston, Scott, and Thomas Howell. Thank you all for coming. So let's see, I have up the issue for today's meeting, which for the sake of the recording is 3415072. And I'd like to talk about this issue, one we've looked at before. Allow user to add display modes from respective field UIs. I'll put I see Ralph beat me to it. Put the link to the meeting in the chat. And for the sake of the recording, the issue number is 2721727. So let me behind the scenes switch branches to the current 11.x branch. Also, there's oh, I haven't shared this yet. Let me get a link to share. Just a moment. Okay, I'm pasting into the Zoom chat a link to my local copy of the site. You can log in as admin. I think that'll work. Maybe just to be sure, I should log in that way myself.
Yes, it does.
Okay. And what this issue is about is adding view modes. So just as a reminder of the current state of affairs, there are two ways to do it. From the structure menu, you can choose display modes and then view modes. And this is the Umami demo profile. So there are quite a few modes already defined: card common, content. There are a few view modes, I guess just one for content block and several for media. And there are buttons to add a view mode. And then under each entity type, for example, content, there's a button to add a content type. This part isn't going to change, but I do want to notice the form. It has name, description, and then you can enable the content type for various bundles, content types. I'm sorry, you can enable the view mode for various content types. So that's one way to get here. The other way to get here is from a particular content type. Say article. Instead of manage fields, you can manage display. And you have subtabs for each of the enabled view modes. You can open this details element near the bottom of the page, custom display settings. And there are a couple of display modes that are not currently enabled. I could enable those. I could disable some of the existing ones. And finally, there's this link at the bottom, manage view modes, which takes me to the page where I was before. Any questions about that context before I go further?
No, I'm familiar with this, of course.
So let me now switch to the issue for today's meeting. So switch my Git branch. And then I'll just reload this page, the manage display page for the article content type. And now changes that at the bottom, instead of a link to the other page, there's a link labeled add new view mode. And if I click that, it opens up a modal. And here I can add a new test view mode. I put in the description. No one ever bothers with that. By default, the new view mode will be enabled for article, and I can also choose to enable it for other content types at the same time if I want. Let me not do that. Let me save this. And, oh, it took a second. But it saved the new view mode. It gives me a link to configure it, to choose which fields will go in it, which is the same thing that I could get to by this subtab. And that is the new functionality from this issue. Again, before I go on any further, any questions about what it's trying to do? Simo, I see you've unmuted. Do you have something to say? I don't hear you. Are you having audio problems, Simo?
Let's see, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so I took my headphones off, so there might be some background noise. When you add from a content tab, you add that new view mode. Does it give the checkbox by default? That is the one where you opened it from. So when you add a new one, it here what you showed that it gives article by default, but does it give if you add view mode from some other, let's say, recipe admin page, then it will it provide default checkbox for recipe?
Yes, I think this is what you're asking. If I go to manage the display for the recipe content type, notice this label has changed. Instead of custom display settings, it's just display settings, add new view mode, and now recipe is the one selected. That's what you're asking? And Simo gives a thumbs up. Okay, so that's clarified. Okay, any suggestions for improvement? Is there anything you don't like about this?
No, I think this looks really great because I know that this, as a developer, I know this is a huge shortcut for that flow. Is this limited to nodes? Make view modes for media, for blocks, for other things, or is the consideration only for nodes right now?
Good question. I haven't tested that. I suspect that it will work for other entity types as well. So you can look at a block type, manage the display of the basic block, display settings.
Yep, that's good.
Add new view mode.
Okay, this looks good then. This looks very good then. Because that would have been the other thing to say, like not just limited to make sure it's not just limited to nodes.
Okay. So I have a couple of things. I was testing this while reviewing the issue, and a couple of things I noticed that sort of didn't hit me the first time I looked at it. So first of all, going back to article, I created this new test. Oh, did I actually disable that, or did I just uncheck it and then not submit the form? Hang on a second. I want to make sure. This is probably just my misremembering. Okay, so it's enabled now for article. So if you remember, when I created this new view mode, I thought about enabling it for other content types, but then decided not to. But now suppose I come to this page, and either that one that I added, or maybe the RSS view mode, and I say, oh, I'm going to enable RSS feeds for all of my content types. Well, I can do it for article and save that. But what's been removed from this page is the link to get back to the main view modes page. We have this new thing that brings up the modal, but we no longer have the link that goes to, and I'll take the, since I already have it open in the tab, I'll just go there. We no longer have the link that goes to this page. So I no longer have an easy way to get from here to here, where I could edit the RSS view mode and enable it for everything. So that's one bit of functionality that's been removed. And the other thing, it's a shame that Aaron isn't here. Oh, go ahead, Thomas.
Was that functionality deliberately removed, or is it accidental? Is it a side effect?
I think it was pretty deliberate that they decided, instead of having the manage display modes link that goes to this page, instead of that link, they have the new link that opens a modal.
Okay, so that makes sense.
So then, what do you think of the styling of this as a standard link that then opens a modal? Is that what we typically do for links that open modal windows, or do we usually style them as buttons?
That's a good general question, because it's an action link. Right, it's not going to change the page to a new, you're not going to a new page, it's an action.
Exactly. I guess in views, everything looks like an ordinary link, right? But what about other places where we use modals?
Use modals specifically?
So let's see, I guess there's been a lot of recent work on creating a new field. This now opens in a modal.
Yeah.
And it's,
Well, see, there's an action link. That's exactly what I sort of was thinking, is that those are standard action links that are placed on the top.
right. So this again, oh, I guess.
But as an action link, that triggered an actual page load.
But this one, I guess I get confused because there are a lot of issues that I've been testing, and I thought that this now opened in a modal, but maybe that issue is still in progress. But this one definitely opens a modal. That got into 10.2. So should we use the same styling for this link? Should this be styled like an action link?
Just a second, I'm going to click around for a second, see what other things look like too. No, so on the even on the form modes, like here, I'll just go to this because it's simple. Or sorry, I just went to the form modes, administration, structure, display modes, form modes. And in it, each section is a gray. See that? It's like the grayed out action link. So that's kind of more of the consistency, but is that because it's on the footer? Right.
This was added fairly recently. These individual links were added fairly recently. And that's sort of related to this issue. I think these should be styled the same as
Here's the great question.
as this
Is there a style guide that we should actually be referencing rather than sort of, because we're piecing together what we think the style guide is. Do we have a style guide to look at? I know that's a hard question at the best of times.
Is there a style guide for
How do you use
Drupal in general, or for
for the admin theme? For the admin theme, let's
the Claro theme in particular? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So does this have a more, is there a way we could see what the given buttons are? Because this looks appropriate in that it's not just a link. It's something different, but again, like the top action links are sort of more defined in that space. But I think like this button, which just having the gray, just makes it look like it does something, like it's a trigger. So that's sort of a good thing. We don't actually have a fixed style guide on how to use buttons.
Thank you, Ralph. Ralph gives us a link in the Zoom chat. Do I need to sign in, or is it going to?
No, you can click in the upper left on that icon, and there you have the categories or pages.
Sign tokens, color palette, typography, spacing, iconography, layers. And normally we read URLs for the sake of the recording, but this is a little too challenging. If I remember, I'll add a link to the issue for today's meeting. Buttons. Let's see. Button. Oops. So we have primary buttons. I guess I have to zoom in a little further for this to be usable. Ghost button is best used for secondary or tertiary content, since it will not or should not compete with your primary CTA. You ideally want the user to see your main CTA, and then, if not relevant, skip over it to the secondary button. Primary button, in different sizes.
It's just searching around for, modal, but it doesn't seem that there's any, it's not like we use a specific button for modals, right? Like we use different styles. There's nothing specific just for modal.
I don't see anything specific for modals.
Yeah.
Simo, go ahead.
That the button, the gray button, is in the same container with the list of items that have the drop buttons, so that's kind of styled the same. Or now I'm looking at it, is it slightly larger?
We're going
So
back
it's
to
kind
this.
of, yeah, so it's in a way its importance is less than the blue one and much more than the drop button, so it kind of makes sense to have that kind of it has a hierarchical relationship in the style.
So I guess it's black on gray, just like the edit button. So these two are styled similarly. Okay, so maybe so maybe this is the right choice. getting back to the current issue, there's no longer a link to this page. That's the first thing that I wonder about.
I don't personally think that that's a problem because we otherwise know where to go to find that, right? We're doubling down the buttons and we're just, right, to leave the old button in is as confusing because you're saying to go through the awkward process to create a view mode, then use it. And that doesn't do anything to help the goal. Which is just
so again, I'm thinking of the use case where I come to this page and say, okay, I'm going to enable RSS. And then I know I also want to enable it for the other content types. I might not know that there's this page available in the admin menu.
If you're saving it for the content type, then you're taking on a different responsibility of saving every other content type from this screen then. And if another view mode automatically picks up fields, then somebody may not know that they need to go and arrange fields. They'll end up with a display that they didn't intend.
So what the existing link does is it goes to a different page. So it's not managing other content types from the same page. It's going to a different page that manages.
The different page just creates the view mode. It doesn't attach to any other entity, right? Whether, whatever category the view mode is. It just builds the view mode and makes it available for the entity type, right? So that's consistent and keeping people on the goal of arranging one content type, right? Like it's good that you can add it into others here, I think, but at the same time, you're not then going into all these other content types and saying, well, figuring out, understanding the fields that those content types use as well, right?
Yeah, I guess what we're talking about basically is a many-to-many relationship. There are many view modes and many content types.
Mhm.
And when I'm looking at a particular view mode, either an existing one from this edit button or a new one from this button, when I'm looking at a particular view mode, I can choose the content type, and that makes sense. When I'm looking at a particular content type, I have all the different view modes available, and that makes sense too. So all I'm suggesting is that we restore the ordinary link, not the action link, that goes from this page or this details element to this other page where I will have that option to look at a single view mode and multiple content types.
Then the title of this first link here where we have add new view mode what would the titles be? Add new view mode, which happens in line, and another link that's view all view modes. Or review, right, like then you're reviewing all.
Let me sort of use my browser tools to try to fake it. And if I just add at the bottom, it go anywhere, but so this I think is what we lost. And I would like to have them styled differently. So this is perhaps an action link or perhaps a button, and this is an ordinary link. And Ralph gave a thumbs up in chat. I'm afraid I'm not sure what you're giving a thumbs up to. Is it my suggestion for restoring? What's that?
I haven't given a thumbs up in chat.
Oh, someone gave a thumbs up in chat. Unfortunately, the I'm sorry, the Zoom app for Linux doesn't show me who gave a thumbs
Duncan
up.
did.
Duncan did, thank you.
But I just threw a thumbs up on the link that Ralph shared.
Ah, okay, thanks. Oh, and I see that Offershall has also joined the meeting. Thank you. So I guess, yeah, this is what I would like to restore with restore this link that goes to the view modes page, not the form modes page, the view modes page. I'd like to restore that link, and I'd like to have different styling. Not entirely sure what styling to have for this. Ralph, go ahead.
Definitely a +1 for restoring manage view modes, because it's a pattern we apply in different places over the recent issues we've had. So leaving the user the option, you can't know every action the user wants to take, and those two would be more convenient. And though the user doesn't have to go into the menu and find the manage view modes or the display modes, then form modes or view modes section or menu item. And therefore +1 in regards to the styling. I'm not sure if I would make them differently, but I also don't know yet which styling would be the appropriate one. And one other detail to note, I've just noticed before, if you are on, for example, the display modes and then view modes page, and you click the edit button, the modal opens, and you click the close button.
Whoa, let's slow down. Let's actually do it
sorry.
instead of talking about it. So
Yeah.
just choose any one and click edit.
Anyone, doesn't matter which. And if you click the close button, for example. Oh, then it's a Safari bug. Because for me, the focus isn't restored to the edit button again.
Oh. Okay. Duncan, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just thinking whether or not it helps to when you then land, because when you land on the manage all view modes, you're looking at it for all of the content types versus you just came from a specific content type, and I'm assuming this list could get fairly long depending on how many content types you have. So, you know, if you scroll down, I mean, you know, and you were working on the media media entity, and then you use that link to land to this page, you would just be landing right at the top, and then you'd have to go and find your specific one that you came from. Is there any sense in kind of, I don't know, being able to go straight to the media? I don't even know if there's like anchor tags there.
Probably there is. So you're suggesting that we restore the link and also improve its target. Oh,
There is something on the parent wrapper, but not on the actual headers.
so not that table.
And whether or not that's even a good idea, I'm just throwing it out there.
It is a good idea, but it is the same problem that this page does get too big when you actually have a full site, right? That's a different reality.
Right, and so Umami is a better illustration of that than standard profile, but a real site would be even more of a challenge. So,
yeah, the UX like to say, if there was, jump on the thought, if there was a bunch of tabs at the top of this page and you switched to tab to see which view mode group entity you wanted to edit, that would make this page more useful, perhaps. But there's different UX in that thought.
Right, and so that could be a separate issue. That's
absolutely.
yeah.
Just talking.
Yeah, either some navigation on this page, or we could put each of these tables into a collapsed details element. A lot of options for how to do it. Definitely would be a separate issue.
So
Go
back
ahead.
to our issue in that respect. I think the problem with having the buttons is that buttons don't really help identify that it's going to open a modal. Same way that we sort of use, a lot of projects, you'll use an icon to say it's going to open in a new tab. There's nothing that indicates that a button's supposed to trigger a modal. Right, rather than going to another, like there's just inconsistency that, like you're clicking on things and you don't know if it's going to be a link in a page load, or you don't know if it's going to be a modal. There's a lot of, like, you click on the thing and you get to it and it does it. You do your work, right, and move on. But that's like here, right at the top there, sorry, right on the manage display, one's a new page, one's a modal. There's no difference. They're not acting like that's supposed to be a clue for a user that it's supposed to trigger a modal. Right?
Yes, I think that's a really good point. I agree. And your question at the start was, do we have a style guide? And I think that we do need some way to indicate modal links.
This is a problem in layouts too, right? Like I'm doing a lot of stuff around layouts, and this is the same problem as people creating buttons in their open dialogues, and you don't know what's actually happening anymore.
Okay, I think that's, again, something that should be its own issue rather than including this issue. And getting back to this issue, there's another problem I have with this workflow. So one is, I missed that one of our regular participants, Aaron McHale, isn't here. But those of you who are also regulars, what would Aaron say about this form? So I think Aaron would say that a form should not try to do too much, and that we have all of these elements where you have to select something and then click the submit button, and then you have the add new view mode button, which takes us to, why is it going to a separate page? I thought it was going to open in a modal. What have I done to break that? Maybe it's because I used browser tools to edit that page and I somehow broke the functionality. There we go. Another test, view mode. And maybe I enable it for all three content types, and then I save the modal, and I never go back to the form and submit it. And, just to give more of a user story to that objection, let's say I come here, I have this long list of view modes and say, no, actually, I don't need any of those. I do want to enable these two. And then, oh, there's one that's missing. I need the missing link. And I save this. And then what has happened is that all the other changes I made to the form have been lost, because when I submit that modal form, it does a full page reload.
And especially if you reorder the fields, then especially it's a problem.
Oh, right. I could do all sorts of other things. Reorder fields.
Reg table puts the asterisk beside it to let you know that you've added things. There's not a lot of indication. That's normal.
But the point is that other things that I may have done on this form without submitting it, I then go to open this modal window, And it does a full page reload, and whatever changes I made up here have been lost.
Yeah.
So I think that when we do open this modal and submit it, I think instead of doing a full page reload, I would like to see it create the view mode and then return me to this form without making further changes, keeping whatever work I have in progress on this form, whether that be things that I have selected or deselected, or other parts of the form where I may have been rearranging elements here. Do you think that's a valid objection? Do you think that would be a better workflow?
And then it would also have to change up at the top, right? With the
Have to add the tab on the top of the page.
tab on the top is what I was trying to say, yeah.
Yeah, so it has to add the inline bullet radio and add in a tab section. That's why it does a load of the page, right? Because then you can go in and add. Well, yeah, okay, so you have the same problem in that you could go in, a user could go in, change field arrangements, then just go up to here, change the view mode, and they lose their settings. That's a normal flaw. Like a normal, wider accepted flaw that if you click on things and you are aware of no, it's inline form. That is correct.
And when I submit the modal form, when I create new view mode, it does automatically get added. This is a long list, so it has switched to vertical display. It normally shows as subtabs horizontally, but there are too many view modes now to display horizontally, so it switches to this vertical. So that does work. On the other hand, there are technical issues with getting it to work. And it's a little bit kludgy the way it's done, but sorry, normally we don't talk about implementation details in the usability meeting, but there are problems there. So I would say that after submitting this form, the view mode gets created, this section gets updated. We do not even select the newly created view mode automatically. Maybe we shift focus to it. That would be nice. And then the administrator selects it, saves the page, and when the form is saved, the new view mode gets added. And oh, it's gone back to horizontal. Who knows? So that's the change I would recommend, and I want to know whether or not we agree with that. So if we're, and also getting back to the many-to-many thing, I would like to simplify this form and remove this section below where we enable it for various other content types, because when I'm in the context of a specific content type like article, I think I should not have the option to enable it for other content types, and that would simplify the form. And then when I submit it, I would like it to come back to this page, select my newly created view mode, and save the form. Go ahead, Thomas.
A minor difference of opinion on that. When you're in the modal, I would still allow you to automatically select it. Like I'd have a binary choice. Do you want to enable this from that? So if you click back on that modal, rather than having all of those choices, I would have it like a yes, no, do you want this enabled for your content type?
Okay.
That would be a behavior that I would expect if I'm creating something. I would get to choose it. I think it's a minor quibble, but that's what I would have expected.
Okay, so you agree with removing the many problem, removing the other content types, but you'd like to keep the option for enabling it for the current content type.
Yeah, and I personally, I would probably have it default to on, just because if I'm adding a new view mode, my working assumption is I'm adding a new view mode to add it to where I am. I don't know why I'd want to create it for some future date. Like to me, that would be the natural workflow, but I would allow people to opt out.
Okay, so you'll save a click by enabling it by default. And then when I save the form, I'd come back here and it would be enabled.
Correct. With the option to opt out, but then you don't even have to worry about where focus is. You can have the focus be wherever you want on the page. And what was bothering me is really, really minor, but like when it reloaded the page, the display settings was closed. If I was working in the display settings, I don't know why I would necessarily want it closed, because I'm thinking in the situation where I'm going to add a couple of view modes. I would want to this is where my focus is. So I'd want to retain my focus, not necessarily on the new view mode, but on the display settings, and not have it collapse when the modal is closed.
Right, so I completely agree that this details element should stay open when the modal is submitted. And in the chat, Ralph says +1 to the closing point Thomas makes. Yeah, so I think that's pretty clear that this should stay open. Other opinions? Agree, disagree?
Agree.
Ralph, go ahead.
In general, I agree, but I'm not entirely sure if it's a good idea to remove the other content types, the option to select others. Why, when you create a new view mode. That option might make sense still from my perspective, and it's more convenient. Otherwise, I have to take an extra step, and that way it would be already in the creation process.
Again, it's the many question, and my opinion is that if I'm looking at a single view mode, I should have the option to manage a bunch of different content types. And if I'm looking at a particular content type, I should not have the option to affect other content types, but I guess I haven't convinced you.
Not entirely. I'm sort of drawn at the moment. I see your point. It definitely makes sense, but on the other way, I see also the point, if you want to achieve that step, it might, and you have to create several in a row, different ones, it might become annoying.
Okay.
Not in a row, but repeatedly over the course of a few days or weeks.
Go ahead, Thomas.
A big contra to Ralph's point, though, is that I think from a learning perspective, it creates a lot of cognitive noise. Like, unless you are really highly experienced, I don't know why I would expect to see that many choices there. And especially I'm thinking of sites that have a huge number of content types. It makes sense from this path to the modal that you're really working here within this display mode. I mean, I'm still kind of stuck on the add new view mode being a link. I kind of wish it was one of those gray tertiary buttons personally, that we looked at when we were looking at the UX style guide thing. Because I know it can't be a big blue save button. I don't want to confuse it as a button with save. But
yeah, I think we're all agreed that it needs different styling, and
Yeah.
we're all agreed that we're not sure what that styling should be.
could be, yeah.
Perhaps it should be this styling.
Yeah, that
And just to make your point about what happens when there are more, the Umami has a bunch of media types. So, well, only 4. Is it block types that it has a bunch of? This is block types. Well, block types there are for media types. There are 5. If we go to manage display. So here we get. And again, on a real site, there could be dozens in this list. And the more there are, the more unmanageable this modal becomes. We'd have to scroll on this list. Anything else you wanted to say, Thomas?
Yeah, I just to reiterate, like I think that Drupal historically for me has had a tendency of putting everything everywhere, and the point that you were saying, sort of wearing the Aaron hat of the simplicity, like I like it being task driven, because if I want to manage a whole bunch of view modes, then I would go to the view modes page and manage a whole bunch of view modes and add things in a bunch of places. But from this path, I feel like we want to make it less confusing. That's just more idealized. And so anything that makes it clear, go in, go out, this is how you create what your task is. And that's everything. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a little less than 10 minutes left, so we need to wrap this up. So can we get a quick vote, thumbs up, or if you want to say more, feel free. But first point is restoring the link to manage view modes. Who thinks that's a good idea? I do. I'm getting thumbs up from Ralph and from Simo. And from Thomas. Okay, does anyone disagree? I'm not sure whether a thumbs up in response to that question counts as disagree or not, but okay, no one is speaking up. So go ahead, Scott.
So sort of what we're talking about is, why are we putting these 2 buttons down here in the details element? Why are they not action links at the top of this page, so that a user knows when they get here that if they want to add something, they can add one there at the top of the page before they start making layout decisions? Like if they come in and they start making field decisions on this display, but at the same time, then they get to the bottom of the display and say, hey, here are the other displays. Then the bottom of the page was the wrong place to focus the user's attention to say, hey, I want to add a new view mode before I get into changing this one's fields. And then you don't have to worry about the new button being the save button, right? Like then we're getting into the conversation of it being a modal, a save, a double save on the form you just came from to return to the page you're on.
So that's a good question. So if we just restore the link down here, that's an actual link, and then
With them, like, just actually put action links at the top of the page here. That is, sorry, I forget what the title was for the original one, for, to modify view modes and add a new one. There are action links at the top of the page.
That's an interesting suggestion. So let's see, this is navigation, so we wouldn't want it quite in this region, but right below that,
That's the action link region. That's where it normally renders.
Yes. So one level of navigation, second level of navigation, and then action links. So create a new field or use an existing field. You'd like to have an action link. I think that's a pretty reasonable suggestion.
Draws people's attention to the task they want to pre-perform before they get into field layouts, and then we don't have to worry about getting somebody to save something in the middle of another action.
Okay, what do people think of that suggestion? Go ahead, Ralph.
I'm not sure how to put it in English, but I'll try. I think how to express it better. It's, for me, semantically, the parts above the field set display settings is more about the fields within that default view mode, and having those, it's definitely tempting to place them in an interesting idea, but I'm not sure if the context is the correct one. It's not quite an exact fit. I'm not sure how to express it in English, sorry.
Okay, so this page, this form, is mostly about fields you want to add to a particular view mode. And it's certainly a less common activity to be adding a new display mode or to enable display mode, and that's why this details element is normally closed by default. And you think that just adding a new display mode should be closer to the list of available view modes. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a separation of concerns. Basically, it's a different kind of action within the display settings field set than what's above in that list.
Go ahead, Thomas.
For me, I think it's an interesting suggestion. However, when I look at this page, it already gets very confusing, and this kind of leans into the other topic of Drupalisms. Like, a view mode is something that is highly advanced, whereas the rest of the page, when you land on it, the top uses the word display, and then you look at things and you think fields. And so having only action buttons at the top that only dealt with view modes would be really confusing, because I imagine that as a new Drupal user, I would come in, I'd click on it, and I would be like, what am I doing here? It would have nothing to do with the above the fold when I landed at this link. It's an advanced action.
Okay. Anyone else have comments to make on that, or can we take a quick vote on the suggestion? So who likes the suggestion of making this an action link at the top of the page? I'm not seeing any thumbs up. Not even from Scott, who suggested that.
Yeah, back and forth on the idea too.
Okay. And who thinks that we should keep it as in the current merge request and have it in this details element? Get a thumbs up from Ralph, Simo, Thomas, and Duncan. Okay. So interesting idea. Thanks for bringing it up, but I think we have pretty strong consensus not to do that. So we have consensus to restore the link, consensus to use some different styling for this, consensus to leave it where it is. And I guess the next point is that when I create a new view mode, I believe we should return to this form with whatever unsaved changes may be part of this form. Does that have consensus? I'm getting a ta-da from Thomas and a thumbs up from Ralph. And a thumbs up from Duncan. Anyone disagree? I don't see anyone disagreeing. Okay. And then the final question is whether we should remove the options for other content types. And I think maybe we don't have consensus on that. I think we should remove the list. Thomas has a thumbs up and already talked about that. And I get a thumbs up from Ralph. Okay. Who wants to keep the list of other things? So I guess no one's voting in favor of keeping them. Simo, you're voting to keep them?
Yeah, I think maybe to have the list, well, it's kind of complicated. To have it as a closed details element would make sense, but then it doesn't make sense in a way that we want to have the default there. So it's, yeah.
Okay, so we don't have consensus there. I think we'll just have to leave it at that. We do have consensus on several other points, and we are just at time. So thank you again for coming. And of course, we'll do it again next week, and I'll get the recording up on the issue within the next couple of days, I hope.
Thank you very much, Benji. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
You have a nice weekend.
You too.